years ago, I got an interim director position with an organic certification group in Binghamton, New York, that took me 3 hours from my home in Flemington, New Jersey. So I looked for a place to stay on the sharing economy site Airbnb during the week, and I found a room I could afford in a delightful Victorian. My host, Mary, an intelligent, progressive community activist, and I became fast friends. We had wonderful talks that year. She took me on outings where I got to meet local movers and shakers in my field, and we had these impromptu gatherings around her dining room table that always included great food, wine, and laughter. I soon came to realize that Mary was doing more than just providing housing for people. She was building ties with friends and strangers. A recent widow with no children, I felt adrift, sort of homeless. Mary's kindness and her hospitality were a great comfort to me. And with her encouragement and fine example, I decided to take the plunge myself and convert my Florida vacation home, which I had been renting out to long-term tenants, into an Airbnb. Now, I really needed the income from the rental. Would people really pay me to sleep with strangers? My home was in a historic Florida tourist town, so I thought this might be a good model. My brother and my neighbor agreed to manage the turnovers. The tenants had left, so I took the week off to get the rooms ready. My sister-in-law added the final touch, a quote on the wall over the four-poster bed that read, "May all who enter as guests leave as friends." Well, I immediately got bookings and quickly fell in love with the Airbnb model, so much so that I helped a friend start one in New Hope, Pennsylvania, that I lived in and managed. But then in 2017, it was time for a change. Thoroughly burnt out after a 30-year career in nonprofit management, I moved to Florida and took on the management and hosting duties, sharing my home with my guests while trying my hand at speaking, writing, and stand-up comedy. People from all walks of life book my cottage's rooms. Golf pros, vacationing families, job seekers, spring breakers, and the occasional hurricane refugee. And I've made some wonderful friends for life. There's Tiny House Betsy, Midlife Crisis Craig, and Handy George. And I've gained tons of comedy material along the way. Take Michelle, for example. I was getting the large room ready for Wu and her father. Their flight from Taiwan was due to arrive late, and so I made sure they had all the correct information to check themselves in that night. I left the light on, and I got ready for bed. Just then, I got a message from Michelle. She was new to Airbnb and understandably apprehensive. She was planning to visit her mother, who had recently been placed in an assisted living facility. Upon her initial booking, we messaged back and forth a number of times to make sure that she was comfortable with all the arrangements. Her message this evening read, "I'll be arriving at 9:30. She was due in 2 weeks. So I thought that was nice of her to let me know her plans so far in advance. So I responded, "Thanks, and we'll see you then." And I went to my room. After midnight, I got a phone call. It was Wu. The bedroom door was locked. I was sure I had left that open. I got up noticing that the light was out as well. With the spare key in hand, I opened the door. Michelle, sound asleep in the bed, gasped loudly when I flipped on the light, exposing a good deal of her lady parts. I knew immediately what had happened. Confused out of her sleep, I exclaimed, "Michelle, what are you doing here? You're not due to be here for 2 more weeks." She looked dazed and cleared her head and said, "Wow, did I really do that?" After some shuffling around involving some fresh linens and a sofa bed, everybody was reset. Then there was the very handsome young man with Slavic-sounding accents who worked in the hospitality industry in Miami. They came up 3 years in a row for the local motorcycle festival. The last year that they came, I was there, and they cooked this wonderful meal over the open fire pit in my backyard. And It had all these meats and vegetables in it and this marvelous sauce, all hot and savory, and they shared it with me. They rented the entire house and crashed everywhere there was space. So I stayed over at my neighbor's house. And I came by the next morning to make them coffee. And I encountered Alex on his way to the restroom wearing only a banana hammock. Talk about hot and savory. I have taken on roles I never imagined for myself as an Airbnb host. I'm a tour guide, an event planner. I'm a babysitter. I'm a chef and a bartender and a taxi driver for a transgender woman named Megan who needed rides back and forth to the doctor after her gender reassignment surgery. An advocate for LGBTQ rights, she told me all the ins and outs of her procedure and her journey. I've referred people to real estate agents, social services, employment agencies, clubs and local fun spots. There's been outings and talks and gatherings, lessons learned, and some heartbreak. There was the breast cancer survivor addicted to pain medication, homeless people by choice and by circumstance, a Turkish woman and her children who had been looking forward to their special trip to the United States for over a year and were determined not to let the airport bombing in Istanbul the day before their departure stop them. I had a couple check themselves in rather late once. I encountered him in the kitchen the next morning, and he looked startled and froze in his tracks. I said, "Good morning, Tom. I see you found your way in and found your room okay." He said, "Yeah," and relaxed a little bit. And then he said, "Thanks for not shooting me." I've had people use Airbnb as a dating site, bad form. I've had international travelers tell me that they were here looking to marry and get their US citizenship. And I had one man, a married traveling salesman, hit on female guests with impunity. Airbnb life is not for everybody. It's not a hotel. It's not sterile, consistent, private. More often than not, they're homes with neighbors and quirks. There's my pets and their pets. There's shared spaces. Accommodations need to be made. And there's the occasional unwelcome critter. Another role I never imagined for myself, bat catcher. And I'd say about half of my guests are really just visitors, vacationers passing through. The rest are looking for something more than just a place to stay. Like Emily, 18, beautiful, rebellious, and fully emancipated as long as somebody else was driving her. She was seeking refuge from a toxic, dysfunctional foster care situation. So she rented my smallest room for 2 weeks. She took the initial stance of indifference to adults, eyes and thumbs on the smartphone, earbuds locked and loaded. We barely talked. She flirted heavily with the male guests, getting them to give rides and meals. Her room was an explosion of teenage confusion, books and gear, and looked like undeposited paychecks. In the beginning, as I said, we didn't talk, but after a while, she started to open up about her situation. She had me drive her to her pharmacist, where she needed to pick up a very complex array of drugs intended to manage her mental health issues. She didn't know what they were for, just that she needed them. One day, she came home laughing hysterically in a floor-length, old bedazzled prom dress that she had put on over her clothes. So I said, "Hi, let's have a girls' day." And so we went, and she said she'd never done that. So we went and got manicures and shopped for shoes to match her gown. I must admit, there are some days when I am just so glad I have no bookings. I sometimes wish that all who would enter as guests would just leave already. I sometimes choose not to engage, and my guests feel the same way, and we never see each other. Except I'm left with their forgotten doggy bag in my refrigerator. I only eat the high-end stuff. But when I choose to be open to fellowship, when I share and I care and I listen, and we share our stories, I'm continually amazed at how much I gain beyond the income and the leftovers. It has become a purpose for me to share not just my home, but my heart. And I look forward to the times when I have to change the room for the next visitor. I love the common ground, the cultural exchange, temporary home that I provide, and the gift of gratitude that I receive in return. I don't always get to know how the story ends. Michelle and I laughed the next day about her early arrival, and it became our little joke on her subsequent visits. But I imagine that her mother has passed because I haven't seen her in a while. Now, Emily, that is a happy ending. Towards the end of her stay, her birth mother came back into her life, and she is living with her now, and she seems very happy on social media anyway. COVID has changed things. I don't share the space with my guests anymore. I rent out the entire space and I stay elsewhere. And I've also started seeing a special someone lately, so perhaps I too am on to my next chapter. I will always treasure the experience of providing more than just shelter for some, but sanctuary. I invite you to consider how you can enjoy the joy of sharing. Think about how you can build community in your life. Maybe not by sharing your home, but sharing your heart in some way. Like my Airbnb mentor, Mary, I built a community, a family of travelers, and much to my surprise, a place of love, laughter, and healing, a new version of home. Thank you.